It was not the size, nor the claws. It was the way it watched me. Like it knew things about my soul I'd forgotten myself. Nightbound bloodline presence. We walk through this world convinced we have mapped its edges, named its creatures, and banished the dark to mere metaphor. We are wrong. The old places remember their true tenants, and sometimes, those tenants remember us. What you are about to hear are not campfire tales. They are accounts, testimonies, fragments of reality where the world's skin grew thin. Listen closely. 5 true unknown creature stories. Our first story comes from the deep woods of the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, a place of ancient rock and older pine. It was sent to us by a man who has asked we call him only Jacob. Story 1. The Clayton Valley Stalker. Jacob is a 42-year-old surveyor, a man whose profession is built on knowing the land, measuring it, defining it. He deals in facts, in lines, in tangible truth. He wrote to us saying, "I need you to understand, I don't believe in the unknown. I believe in tape measures and topography maps." What he found in Clayton Valley, however, believed in him. My name's Jacob. Like he said, I'm a surveyor. I've spent more nights under a canvas tent than most people have in their own beds. I've heard every weird noise a forest makes. Creaking trees, foxes screaming, the whole 9 yards. It's just nature. It's just sound. This was last October. I was on a week-long job, plotting a boundary line for a new timber leaseway out in Clayton Valley. Beautiful country, but isolated. The kind of quiet that feels heavy. I'd set up my base camp near a creek. Just me, my gear, and my truck. The third night, that's when the feeling started. That prickling on the back of your neck. That animal part of your brain switching on. I was cooking beans over my little gas stove, and I just stopped. The forest had gone dead silent. No crickets, no owls, no rustling. Just the wind, and even that felt hushed, like the woods were holding their breath. I shook it off. Long day, tired eyes. I turned in. Must have been around 2 a.m. when I woke up. Not to a sound, but to a smell. It came through the tent vents. This thick, musky odor. Like wet dog, but mixed with something else. Something rancid, like old meat left in the sun. It was so strong it made my eyes water. I lay there, frozen, and then I heard the footsteps. They were slow, deliberate. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. Heavy, too heavy for a deer, too regular for a bear. They circled my tent. Once, twice. I could hear a low, wet snuffling sound right against the nylon, right by my head. I could see the fabric dimple in, like something was pressing against it. My heart was a jackhammer in my throat. I had a rifle in the truck, 20 feet away. It might as well have been 20 miles. The snuffling stopped. The footsteps moved away, crunching back into the tree. The silence returned, thicker than before. I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I found the prints. In the soft mud by the creek. They weren't right. They were bipedal, like a man's, but elongated. Over a foot long. The toes were distinct, with deep gouges at the tips where claws dug in. The stride was enormous. And in the center of the print, where a human arch would be, was a deep, padded impression. Like a wolf's paw, but stretched and twisted to fit a man's gait. I took pictures. I measured them. My professional mind was screaming, trying to categorize, to explain. A hoax? Out there? A deformed bear walking on its hind legs? The geometry was all wrong. All of it was wrong. That night, I stayed in my truck cab, rifle across my lap. I kept my flashlight off, letting my night vision adjust. The moon was a cold sliver. I saw it just after midnight. It emerged from the tree line about 50 yards away at the edge of the meadow. It stood on 2 legs, silhouetted against the gray night sky. It was tall, 7 feet, maybe more. Its shoulders were hunched, powerful. The head was canine, wolf-like, but the muzzle was shorter, blunter. And the eyes, God, the eyes. They caught a stray bit of starlight and reflected it back as a faint, amber glow. It wasn't looking around. It was staring directly at the truck. At me. It knew I was there. It had always known. Then it moved. It didn't walk. It loped. A terrible, fluid motion on two legs, unnaturally fast, covering ground with a predatory grace that made my blood freeze. It didn't run at me. It cut diagonally, disappearing into the pines on the far side of the meadow. It was hurting me, blocking the old logging road that was my only way out. That's when the sound started. From the woods to my left, a deep, guttural howl that dissolved into a choked, almost human-sounding laugh. From directly ahead, where it had vanished, a thunderous crack of a tree branch being snapped like a twig. It was playing with me, showing me its strength, its intelligence, telling me the woods belonged to it. I started the truck. I didn't care about gear, about the job. I threw it in reverse and gunned it down the path I'd come in on, my headlights slicing through the dark. For 100 yards, I saw nothing. Then, movement in the trees to my right. It was keeping pace, running on all fours now, a gallop that matched my speed with horrifying ease. Its body was a mass of shadow and matted, dark fur. For a second, it turned its head, and those amber eyes locked with mine through the passenger window. I hit the main gravel road and didn't stop shaking until I saw the first streetlight of the nearest town. I never went back. My company had to send a crew of 3 to retrieve my equipment. I quit the job. I sold my surveying gear. I know what I saw. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a man in a suit. It was something that lives in the spaces between our maps. Something that knows the smell of our fear. I was a man who believed in lines and boundaries. Now I know, some things refuse to be measured. Jacob's account, complete with the photographs he provided, which we have analyzed and found deeply troubling, is a stark reminder that the American wilderness holds secrets older than our highways. Our next story takes us from the deep woods to a very different, but equally lonely, landscape, the sun-scorched deserts of the American Southwest. Story 2, The Thing in the Arroyo. This report comes from Mara, a 28-year-old long-haul trucker. Her world is one of asphalt, radio static, and the endless, rolling horizon. Her credibility rests on her vigilance. Her life depends on seeing hazards miles ahead. What she witnessed one night outside of Tonopah, Arizona, was a hazard for which there is no road sign. I'm Mara. I drive an 18-wheeler. Phoenix to Denver and back. Mostly. You see a lot of weird stuff on the night road. Lights, animals, folks broken down. You learn to help or you keep moving. I'm a practical person. My philosophy is, if it won't fit in my logbook, I don't waste time on it. This was this past July. Blistering heat wave. ID pulled off the I-10 onto a service road to catch a few hours of shut-eye in my sleeper berth. It was about 3 a.m., dead quiet, in the middle of absolute nowhere. Just scrub, sand, and a dry wash, an arroyo, about 100 yards from the road. I was almost asleep when my dog, Duke, a big old Rottweiler mix who's scared of nothing, started growling. Not a bark, a low, trembling rumble from deep in his chest. I sat up. That's when I heard it. A scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged over gravel and sand. Coming from the arroyo. I figured it was a coyote maybe, dragging some kill. But Duke was shaking, whining. I'd never seen him like that. I grabbed my high-power flashlight, cracked the cab door, and shone it toward the sound. At first, I saw nothing. Just the moon-bleached sand and the dark line of the arroyo bank. Then the scraping stopped, and something stood up. It uncoiled from the ditch, slow, like it was made of liquid shadow. It was tall and impossibly thin. Its limbs were too long, spindly, like a starving man's, but they moved with a horrible, jointless fluidity. The flashlight beam hit it, and the skin, it wasn't skin. It looked like cracked, dried mud or parchment, reflecting the light in a dull, matte way. It had no features I could see. No eyes, no mouth. Just a smooth, elongated head that seemed to taper to a point. But it knew the light was on it. It turned that blank face toward me, and then it made this sound. It came up the side of the arroyo and started crossing the flat ground between us, its body low to the earth, moving with a spider's terrible speed. I wasn't thinking. I was pure instinct. I slammed the door, fired up the rig, and didn't even bother with my headlights. I just flooded the area with my front-facing LED light bar. The thing froze in that blinding white light. For a second, I saw it clearly. Its torso was ribbed, like a dried creek bed, and where its hands should have been, they were just long, tapering points, like sharpened sticks of clay. It didn't like the light. It raised one of those spike arms, not in threat, but like it was shielding itself. It let out another sandpaper hiss, and then it just fell apart. Not like it died, like a sandcastle collapsing. It dissolved into a pile of what looked like dark, granular dirt right there on the desert floor. The wind kicked up immediately, a sudden gust, and scattered the pile into nothing across the scrubland. I sat there for a full 10 minutes, engine running, Duke panting and drooling in sheer terror. When the sun finally started to pink the sky, I got out. My legs were jelly. There was no sign of it. No tracks, even in the soft sand near the arroyo. Nothing. Just the smell of ozone and hot, dry earth. I reported it to the state patrol as a hazardous animal on the road. They humored me. I know what they thought. Heat exhaustion. Loneliness. I've driven through heat and loneliness for a decade. This was different. That thing, it wasn't of this earth. Or it was made of the oldest, driest part of it. I don't stop on service roads after dark anymore. Duke wanted to even get out of the truck past sunset unless we at a busy truck stop with 1,000 lights. I don't believe in aliens or monsters. I believe in diesel and deadlines. But I also believe that there are places so old and empty that they grow things. Things that wear the land itself as skin. A creature of desiccated earth and alien geometry. Mara's account chills us not just for its content, but for its setting, a place we think of as barren, empty. It suggests that the void does not like to be left unfilled. For our third story, we cross an ocean to the ancient, rain-soaked forests of Central Europe, where the trees themselves seem to hold memories of older, sharper teeth. Story 3. The Beskid Mountain Beast. Our next correspondent is Karel, a 60-year-old retired forestry officer from the Czech Republic. A man who spent 35 years patrolling the Beskid Mountains, a man for whom the woods were a second home, a living system he understood intimately. His letter began, "I have seen the Lesny Muz, the forest man, of folklore, and he is not a man. I am Karel. For all my working life, I was a Lesnik, a forester. My job was to know the woods, every sick tree, every animal path, every sound. I was not a superstitious man. The old stories were for tourists, for scaring children. The forest was my office. I respected it, but I did not fear it. It was the autumn of my final year before pension. Very wet, very foggy. The mist clung to the firs like wet wool. I was doing a routine check on a remote sector, on foot, as I always did. The silence was different that day. Not peaceful, watchful. I began to notice the absence of birds. Not a single jay, not a woodpecker. Even the insects were quiet. Then, the smell hit me. Not the good smell of damp earth and pine. This was the smell of a wet animal. Yes, but underneath, there was a sweetness. A sickly, rotten sweetness, like spoiled fruit and old blood. It made my stomach turn. I heard a heavy thump off to my left, deep in the fog. Then another, to my right. Like something large jumping down from a rock. I stopped. My hand went to the old rifle on my shoulder. "Who is there?" I called out in Czech. Only the drip of water from the branches answered. That's when I saw the first one. A shape, darker than the surrounding fog, standing between two massive spruce trees. It was not a bear. It stood erect, but its posture was wrong, stooped, with its arms too long, hanging past its knees. It was covered in a shaggy, gray-brown fur, matted with wet and leaves. I could not see its face. As I stared, a second shape emerged from the mist behind it. Then I saw a third, further back. They were surrounding me, not moving, just standing, silent. I felt a primal terror then, a coldness in my bones older than reason. This was not an animal defending its territory. This was a strategy. I raised my rifle, not to shoot, but to look through the scope. The magnification brought the nearest one into terrible clarity. The fur was not like a bear's. It was stringy, like the moss that hangs from dead branches. And its hands, they were huge, with long, black fingers that ended in thick, dirt-caked nails. But it was the head that stopped my breath. It was elongated, almost horse-like, but with a brutal, heavy jaw. And where the eyes should have been, there were only deep, dark sockets, shadowed under a heavy brow. It had no eyes that I could see, yet it was looking at me. I know it was. One of them, to my rear, made a sound. It was a low, gurgling click, deep in its throat. It wasn't a growl. It was communication. The one in my scope slowly, deliberately, raised one of those long arms. It pointed a black-nailed finger, not at me, but past me, down a game trail that led deeper into the valley, away from my route home. It was directing me, hurting me. I knew then that if I went where it pointed, I would never come out. I was not looking at creatures. I was looking at the forest itself, given a will and a shape, and it was telling me to leave. I did not run. Running triggers the chase in a predator. I lowered my rifle, took a slow step back, then another. I turned and walked, keeping my pace steady, my back crawling with the sensation of those empty sockets watching me. I walked for an hour before I dared to glance back. The fog had swallowed everything. The silence was finally just silence. I took early retirement. I have not set foot in the deep woods since. My colleagues, they think the years finally got to me. Maybe they did. But I ask you, if the woods are alive, as we foresters know they are, what is to stop them, one day, from growing legs and standing up? I saw the guardians of the old groves, and they have no eyes, because they do not need them. The forest itself is their eyes. Guardians of the grove, wardens of the wood. Carol's story touches on a profound and ancient fear, the sentience of the land itself. It is a theme that echoes in our next account, though the setting could not be more different. Not a deep forest, but the cold, clinical environment of the deep sea and the thing that followed a research vessel home. Story 4. The Deep Tenant. This testimony comes from Dr. Eris Thorne, a 38-year-old marine biologist specializing in abyssal zone ecology. Her world is one of data, pressure readings, and bioluminescent spectra. She contacted us not to share a ghost story, but to report an anomaly, a biological impossibility that, by her own scientific parameters, should not exist. Yet, she insists it does. I am Eris. My work involves month-long research cruises in the North Pacific, studying life at depths exceeding 4,000 meters. We use ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, with high-definition cameras. We see things most people never will. Undiscovered jellyfish, blind eels, worms that glow. It is all catalogable, all part of the system. Until Project Cycle 7. We were mapping a previously unexplored section of the seafloor, a cold, dead plain. The ROV's lights cut through the eternal dark, illuminating silt and the occasional rock. Then, we saw the trench, a narrow, sheer fissure. As we guided the ROV along its edge, the sonar picked up a large, solid object lodged partway down the cliff face. We moved in for visual confirmation. It was a shipping container. Corroded, ancient. How it got there was a mystery for another day. But as the lights played over it, we saw something else. Something was on it, clinging to the metal. At first, we thought it was an enormous, mutated isopod or a strange type of deep-sea anemone. The camera zoomed in. The silence on the operations deck was absolute. It was roughly the size and shape of a large dog, but that's where all resemblance to anything known ended. Its body was a lumpen, asymmetrical mass of a substance that looked like pale, veined rubber. It had no discernible head, just a front end where several appendages protruded. They weren't tentacles. They were more like thick, fleshy stalks, each ending in a different structure. One had a lamprey-like circular mouth of tiny, hooking teeth. Another ended in a fan of fine, hair-like cilia that waved in the current. A third had a single, unblinking orb that reflected our light with a dark, blue sheen, an eye. But the most wrong thing was how it moved. It didn't swim. It crawled across the container and the rock face with a slow, peristaltic motion, its rubbery body contracting and expanding, those stalk appendices feeling its way. It was utterly oblivious to our lights, to the ROV. It was like watching a creature from another planet's ocean. We logged the coordinates, took exhaustive video and spectral scans. The biological material readings were chaotic, inconsistent with any known phylum. It was the find of a lifetime, a nightmare of taxonomy. The trouble started on the voyage back. Crew members on night watch reported hearing faint, wet scraping sounds against the hull below the waterline. Our hull-mounted hydrophones, designed to listen for whales, picked up something else, a low-frequency pulsing, like a slow, fleshy heartbeat that seemed to circle the ship for hours at a time. We dragged sampling nets. They came up empty, but coated in a strange, gelatinous slime that fluoresced a sickly green under blacklight. The final night, I was on deck alone, unable to sleep. The sea was calm, a black mirror under a sliver of moon. I saw it then. Alongside the ship, just below the surface, a pale, shapeless blob kept pace with us. One of its stalk appendages broke the surface for a moment, that single dark eye orb glistening wetly in the moonlight, staring up at the ship, at me, before sliding back beneath the waves. It had followed us for hundreds of nautical miles. From a trench 4 kilometers deep, we reached port. The sound stopped. The slime ceased appearing. But the data is irrefutable. My colleagues want to publish. They call it Panopea abyssis incognita, the unknown abyssal giant. I call it something else. A tenant. A thing that lives in a pressure that would crush us, in a darkness we can scarcely imagine. And we woke it up. We shone a light in its face, and it followed the light home. I have bad dreams now, not of drowning, but of that eye, breaking the surface of a calm, black sea, full of a cold and ancient curiosity. We think we explore the deep, but what if the deep, sometimes, decides to explore us back? A biological anomaly with a mind of its own. Dr. Thorne's account forces us to confront the terror of the truly alien, a consciousness born in crushing blackness. For our fifth and final story, we return to land, to a place that is neither forest nor desert, but the most familiar ground of all, the family home, and the thing that lived in its walls. Story 5. The Thing in the Walls of Maple Street. Our final account comes from a woman named Sophie, a 33-year-old graphic designer and mother of a 4-year-old boy. She represents the ultimate anchor of normalcy, suburban life, school runs, and mortgage payments. Her horror is not found in the wilderness, but in the place where we are meant to feel safest. Her story begins not with a sighting, but with a sound. I'm Sophie. My life is school projects, client deadlines, and trying to keep the house tidy. I'm not. I wasn't imaginative. My biggest fears were practical. The mortgage, my son Leo getting sick. We bought the house on Maple Street 2 years ago. A fixer-upper. It had character, the realtor said. The first year was normal. Then, last winter, the noises started. Not the usual settling of an old house. This was different. It started as a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone gently rapping a knuckle on the inside of the baseboards in Leo's room. We checked for pipes, for mice. Nothing. Then it evolved into a scraping, a slow, deliberate drag, like a heavy piece of furniture being moved an inch at a time, but in the walls, between the first and second floor. It would start just after midnight and stop around 3 a.m., like clockwork. We had exterminators, contractors, even a plumber with a scope camera. They found nothing. No animal signs, no leaks, no explanation. The smell came next. It would bloom in a room without warning, a damp, earthy smell, like wet clay and old mushrooms. It would linger for an hour, then vanish as if it had never been. You'd walk into the kitchen for a glass of water at 2 a.m., and the air would be thick with it, cold and choking. But the worst was the whispering. It was never loud enough to make out words. It was a sibilant, paper-dry rustle of sound that seemed to come from the air vents. It didn't sound human. It sounded like many voices, all talking at once, but quietly, secretively. I'd be working late at my desk and hear it seep into the office. I'd freeze. Leo started having night terrors. He'd scream about the crumbly man in his closet who talked in dirt. My husband, Mark, thought it was stress, a shared delusion, until the night he saw it. He'd gotten up to check the thermostat in the hallway. As he passed the narrow, always dark gap between the linen closet and the bathroom door, he saw movement. He thought it was Leo. He whispered his name. The shape in the dark stopped moving. And then, Mark says, it unfolded. It had been pressed into the gap, impossibly thin. It stepped out into the dim night-like glow. Mark described it as tall, emaciated, its skin the color and texture of drywall mud. It had no discernible face, just indentations where features might have been. Its arms were too long, and its fingers, they were like brittle sticks. It turned its head toward him. There was a faint, crackling sound, like plaster crumbling. And then it moved. Not toward him. It walked, with a stiff, jerky gait, directly to the living room wall and melted into it. Not through a crack. The wall seemed to ripple like water, swallowing it. And then it was just wall again. Smooth. Painted. Normal. Mark was a skeptic. A software engineer. A logic processor. He came back to bed gray-faced, shaking, and said, "We have to get out. Now." We took Leo and went to a hotel that night. The next day, we brought a priest, a psychic, a paranormal investigator. You name it, we were desperate. The investigators set up infrared cameras. On the very first night, in the empty house, they captured it. The footage is clinical, and that makes it worse. At 1:17 a.m., a heat signature, cold and blue against the warmer walls, separates from the interior of the bedroom wall. It moves across the room, a tall, thin blob of cold. It pauses by Leo's empty bed for a full minute. Then it walks to the opposite wall and simply fades, its heat signature dissipating as it merges back into the structure. The investigator said he'd never seen anything like it. He called it a structural haunting. Not a ghost in the house. A ghost of the house. Something that used the lathe and plaster, the wiring conduits, the very bones of the building, as its body and its highway. We sold the house at a massive loss. We told the buyers about the quirks. I don't know if they believed us, but I know this. We didn't bring anything with us. No furniture, no toys from Leo's room. We left it all. Because that thing, it didn't come with the land. It didn't come with some tragic history. I think it came with the materials. Something in the old timber, or the plaster, or the stone of the foundation. Something that slept and was awakened by the warmth and breath of a family. It learned our patterns from inside the walls. It listened to our conversations. It watched our son sleep. We live in a new build now, all drywall and synthetic materials. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I lie awake and listen to the silence. And I pray to a God I am not sure I believe in, that this silence is just silence. That the walls are just walls. Because you can run from the woods, or the desert, or the sea. But how do you run from the very thing that shelters you? 5 accounts. 5 breaches in the world we think we know. From the deep woods to the deep sea, from the desert to the suburbs. A single thread connects them all. The confrontation with something that should not be witnessed by those who trusted their own senses and their own logic. They are left with a new, unsettling truth. The map has blank spots, and in those blanks, things are stirring.